Donc, bonjour à tout le monde. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to be here again as a moderator, this time on AI. I am a political philosopher. I'm not an expert in AI, but as a political philosopher, of course, I follow, or I try to follow very close what AI makes with us. Because the key question of political philosophy is, how do we want to live together? And regarding AI, I think this is giving us some questions to solve, and that will be the theme of our panel here. Let me just start by the vision, or by the question, or by the thinking that maybe after yes? Oui, bien sûr. Bien sûr. J'oublie personne. That maybe after the digitalization, after big data, after crypto, after all we already know, AI might really change a lot the way we live together. And it's really the technology for which I'm hoping that it's not going to replace us entirely. But I think that we have now here three people who really can inform us a lot about AI, because we have, as first, we have Muriel. She's an academic, she's a researcher on AI, and she will tell us a lot of how it works and what it could make to us. We have Geoffroy with us. We heard him already this morning. He's an entrepreneur. He's an ancient president of MEDEF, of the French company, so he will give his perspective as an entrepreneur from the economic side. And then we have Scott Carpenter, who is coming from Google. I mean, I won't say that whenever I hear Google, I say, oh my God, please not. Please do not let enter Google our world. We will see what he is going to tell us about AI. Let me start with you, Muriel. You already look back to a remarkable academic career. You made research on AI, and as you told me, you tried to explain to your students what AI is. And I would be very glad to hear that from you here, because I'm sure that everybody sitting in here has quite a clear idea what AI, perhaps not what AI is, but what AI is not. And everybody says AI is not really intelligence. So tell us more what AI is and what AI is not.
So thank you. I have this difficult task of doing technical stuff, explaining technical stuff right when you're digesting. So as I'm a cognitive science, I did neuroscience of language, I know how much blood is currently not in your brain. So please, with all your attention, try to make some blood go to your brain in order to help me, because I have this task. But I would love to tell you why we decided to start with making you understand a little bit what happened with AI getting to the level of automating language production, which is the last step of AI we had here. We decided this because the panel is about citizen. And being about citizen, it means I'm not going to focus on the system so that you understand the system, that's it. I'm going to focus on the system because as every tool that you use, you want to know how to use it. And in order to know how to use it, you have to know it. So if it's totally transparent when you have a knife in front of you, then it's not really totally transparent when you are in front of a conversational agent. So we are not understanding just for the pleasure of understanding, but we are understanding to make the tool more transparent so that you know how to hold it. You know, you're not going to hold it on the part that is cut, that cuts, right? And so this is why we're just entering this. The first thing I would like to introduce is the way the tool sees words. And so when you are inside an interface of a whatever conversational agent, you are inserting words in the interface. And this is your job as a user, right? But now I would like to focus on how these words are computationally understood, and I say understood, quote, quotes, by the machine. And for this, we're gonna use this word cloud that you see on the screen. And the other important thing is that you enter the words, you will follow the schema. These words are cut into pieces, and they are transformed into digital values, because the system is all about numbers. So at some point, the words have to transform into numbers. And this is the very first step. They are transformed into numbers, and then after being transformed into numbers, they enter inside a loop that is gonna decide what are the next words. So this predictive system is taking the words of your question and then say, what's the most likely word to follow the words of your question? Okay? So it enters, you follow the arrow, all the little barcodes that you see over there are something that is called a word vector. And this is the most technical word I'm gonna speak, so don't worry. They are word vectors, and in order to understand what are these little barcodes over here, I'm gonna show you this word, this cloud of words. And just to be very clear about what I'm gonna speak, you're gonna see now on the screen, sorry. Yeah. So the only moment where artificial intelligence enters in the thing is about calculating the predictions. So the kind of network you see is the real language network that is calculating what is the next word, okay? And so imagine that you are a mechanical arm that has to take words in a bag, exactly how you would like to take words in this cloud of words. What are you going to do to make it more efficient? Are you going to put all the synonyms together? Probably not. Because if you want to efficiently build a sentence, you hardly have a synonym in a sentence. I'm hardly going to speak a sentence like felon, cat, meow in all the same sentence, because you already have cat. You don't need to speak again about felon. You don't need to speak again. So the best efficiency you can get to make a sentence is to put all the words that are usually in that sentence close to each other. So this is why you have economy, growth, and rates that are close to each other. According to the system like ChatGPT, this is GPT-2, an example taken from GPT-2, growth, economy, and rates are similar. Why are they similar? Because I'm a mechanical arm and I want to take all the words in order to build a nice sentence. So if your question is about economy, my answer will probably be statistically about growth, hopefully, about rate, and all the kind of things you can find in sentences. So words are similar into this system because they often go together in the same sentence. And this is very important because what happens if you train the system not on this kind of sentences where you have growth and rate and economy in the same, but on a lot of documents that speak about economy decline, décroissance. You end up in having answers to your question about economy that have inside all the concepts of economic decline and décroissance. So it's very important to understand the impact of what you train your algorithm on the kind of answer you get, because it could be much, much more controversial than having just a talk about economical decline, right? And so this is to say that this kind of word clouds carry a vision of the world. And typically in those word clouds, women are similar to kitchen. So statistically, if you ask about women, you'll have the word kitchen coming out. Or in Chinese algorithm, you'll have chaos close to democracy. So it's really important to understand the vision of the world that the words that are in the same sentences carry in the data set that is the training data set. So if I train on description of democracy that are not European, for example, I'll have a bias in all the answers I get on this topic. So it's really important to understand the fact that transforming language into numbers carries all the biases of normal statistics into language. And another thing, so one parallel that could be done with what I just showed you is this picture I took from an airplane earlier this year, because what we've been doing by looking to this cloud of worlds is that we've been looking at a city from an airplane. So you hardly think about language at scale. You're not thinking, oh, I'm going to use a gerundive right now to give a little bit more of an ongoing feeling to the person that is listening to me. You hardly think about the fact that your adverb should be at that place and not in another place in the sentence. You're never looking at language at scale, like we did with the word clouds. You're never thinking about that very often growth rate and economy are in the same sentence. So the real understanding of AI is to understand that things in an algorithm are dealt at scale. So you never visit a city from an airplane. You go into the streets. So it means that when you are in the airplane, you're having this bird eye on everything that is interaction of people on social media. You have the bird eye on what interaction. Whatever other thing that you deal about at scale is going to give you this broad view of the streets that you don't get when you walk into the streets. When you walk into the street, you see buildings. You don't see that there is a big alley in the middle of this city that goes along the river and everything. So it's really the main idea I would like you to bring home is that AI is looking things at scale.
Thank you. I'm quite a skeptical user of AI, I must say. I tried once or twice. I put a question into ChatGPT, and then what came to me really frightened me. And it frightened me because of, A, it bored me in a manner that I would never have thought to. It was so boring. I got 12 pages to my answer to my question, and it was so boring. So at the end, I really thought I didn't learn anything new. I didn't see anything new. And it just broke down my thoughts, my thinking. So my question is, if what you described now, what does this make to our brains if we use it too often? If we try to copy our brain into that?
So what is currently happening with AI is something that people call in economy cognitive automation. So basically, what is cognitive automation? Everything that was like summarizing, analyzing data that you can do now with ChatGPT and was only a thing that human could do. So this labor share of the work can be now supplemented by some capital, meaning compute. So it's really important to understand that we are in a period, economically speaking, that we are transforming things that only labor could do, humans, summarizing, for example, that are now can be done by machines. And machines means capital, investment, infrastructure. And what was the kind of machine that was doing this before was our brain. And so the first big cognitive automation that has been studied is the arrival of GPS in taxi drivers. This was the first big cognitive automation because who was able to navigate was the brain. And most particularly, not only the brain, but another part of, a special part of the brain that is called hippocampus. And so here it is. It's like a blue banana. This is a private joke for people that discussed with me yesterday. And of course, it's not the only part that is linked to navigation. I don't want you to get a neurophrenologist idea of my presentation. It is a network. But what we know about this thing that I call the human capital is that it's trained to become a taxi driver, especially in London, which is the only profession of taxi drivers that decided not to go into GPS. And they were the object of studies for 25 years at UCL, University College of London. They were able to identify how many hours it means to learn to navigate across the 600,000 streets of London. And this is really interesting because they tried many experiments. It's just 25 years of experimental cognitive neuroscience, and it has huge implication also for Alzheimer, because Alzheimer starts in the hippocampus somehow. And what they discovered is that when they stopped, when they retired, the size of their hippocampus, that was like 4 times as big as mine, definitely, is that it returned to the normal size. So there is a huge impact of delegating or stopping a cognitive automation on the volume, on the neurological volume of a brain area that is specialized as the hippocampus is. And I would like just to show you a picture, because it's a moment of proudness. So this is more or less all the areas that are involved in language. Multimodal, so everything language, just from auditory, visual, words, sentences, articulation, everything. So if you have a closer look at what's the language network, this is a picture from my PhD, you have less areas. So if you just look at what is forming a sentence. So now imagine the impact of summarizing less or stopping to summarize on your cognitive faculty of a cognitive function that is as broad as language in the brain. And this is actually what is happening in some big tech firms, that they are stopping to a certain amount of hour per day the use of conversational agents already 1 month ago. So it's not only, I hope that through the taxi driver example, I gave you an experimental grasp of what it is to have an informed point of view on things and not just an opinion.
Thank you very much. So that means if you use AI too much, you will just fall into dementia too early. I mean, this is really hard to assess, I must say. If you go one step further, Geoffrey, on vous a déjà entendu ce matin sur la relation entre la démocratie et le marché libre. Vous êtes entrepreneur, vous êtes notamment dans le domaine de la télécommunication. Vous avez investi beaucoup, vous avez eu de revenus, etc. Vous avez changé beaucoup.
J'ai aussi perdu beaucoup. Hein.
Ok, je voulais pas dire, mais je croyais que c'était le cas, parce que sinon, si on prend pas de risque, on gagne rien. Mais pour savoir un petit peu de vous, dans toutes ces dernières années, dans quelle mesure est-ce que l'IA a changé votre produit, vos services, vos compagnies, la façon dont vous regardez comme compagnie ce développement?
Bonjour à tous. Bon, alors, d'abord, un premier mot. Je suis désolé de vous imposer une deuxième participation. Je vais essayer d'être bref, un peu moins long que ce matin. Et la deuxième chose que je veux dire, je ne suis pas du tout un expert de l'intelligence artificielle, donc j'ai déjà appris beaucoup de choses, donc je serai très modeste. Alors, je commence par une bonne nouvelle, c'est que ChatGPT n'a aucun sens de l'humour. Parce que si vous lui posez la question en disant est-ce qu'il faut mieux l'intelligence artificielle ou la bêtise naturelle, il ne comprend pas la question. Bon. Et donc, il nous restera, quoi qu'il arrive, avec l'avènement de l'intelligence artificielle, au moins une chose qui est le propre de l'homme, c'est le sens de l'humour. Donc, c'était la bonne nouvelle de l'après-midi. Alors, qu'est-ce que je peux vous dire sur ce que je vois dans la manière dont l'intelligence artificielle peut transformer les entreprises? D'abord, la première question qui peut se poser, c'est est-ce qu'on est face à une énième révolution technologique qui, depuis le XIXe siècle, remplace, comme vous l'avez d'ailleurs très bien dit, du travail par du capital. Quand on a inventé la machine à vapeur, on a remplacé, alors c'était le travail du cheval et du laboureur, mais quand on a mis des avions de ligne pour remplacer les transatlantiques, quand on a inventé le téléphone, le computer, etc. Donc on a fait ça depuis très longtemps. Donc on pourrait se dire, au fond, nothing new, il y a des adopteurs, il y a des gens qui vont perdre leur job, et tout ça est le capitalisme schumpeterien de destruction créatrice très connu. Je pense qu'il y a une différence, effectivement, assez forte, telle que je peux la sentir, c'est que tout ce qui a été remplacé, le travail humain qui a été remplacé depuis 200 ans, est du travail sans capacité créative. Donc c'est, si on prend les derniers, ce qu'on fait en computer, on met de l'IT partout dans les entreprises pour faire des calculs de probabilité, pour faire des calculs de comptabilité, etc. Mais dans lequel il y a du temps de cerveau, mais il n'y a pas de valeur ajoutée. La vraie différence, d'après ce que je peux comprendre, c'est que là, on va demander à ChatGPT ou à un autre modèle de remplacer un avocat, pas seulement pour, je dis un avocat parce que Jean-Guillaume est avocat évidemment, donc ça va être tout de suite un peu provoqué, pas seulement pour lui demander de nous faire une note sur les jurisprudences, sur tel ou tel cas, mais aussi pour recommander une solution, pour préparer une plaidoirie, pour choisir. Alors, c'est quand même très différent des révolutions précédentes. Et même si la nature des bouleversements, c'est-à-dire remplacer le travail par le capital, détruire des jobs et en créer d'autres, peut être similaire, il est possible, il est probable que ça soit d'une ampleur qui n'a pas connu d'égal dans les révolutions industrielles précédentes. Alors, faut-il le craindre? Faut-il s'en réjouir? Je ne sais pas encore. Moi, je suis de nature optimiste. C'est-à-dire que chaque fois qu'on détruit des emplois, qu'on détruit des entreprises, il s'en recrée beaucoup plus d'autres. On a des centaines d'exemples que vous connaissez tous. Deuxième élément de réflexion, la vitesse. Les premières recherches, comme vous le savez, elles datent des années 60. Mais la courbe est totalement exponentielle. Je vous donne juste une anecdote. Moi, j'ai rencontré il y a maintenant 19 mois, je crois, un jeune politicien normalien qui travaille chez DeepMind, donc une entreprise de Google, qui m'a dit, et qui est venu me voir sur recommandation en me disant voilà, je cherche de l'argent parce que je voudrais monter un concurrent européen, français à ChatGPT. Il y a un enjeu de souveraineté, j'ai besoin de financement. J'ai dit oui, mais enfin, ça fait quand même 15 ans qu'il y a eu beaucoup d'argent mis, des centaines, des dizaines de gens, enfin de millions de dollars, ou peut-être des centaines, des gens qui cherchent. Vous êtes 5 copains de l'X et je sais pas quoi, vous n'allez pas y arriver. Et là, droit dans les yeux, il me dit si, donnez-moi 6 mois et quelques millions d'euros et on va y arriver. Alors je me suis dit, soit c'est un imposteur, soit c'est un génie. Alors comme je suis joueur, j'ai mis un peu d'argent. Et donc il a créé Mistral AI qui vient d'être valorisé 6 milliards de dollars. Alors vous allez me dire, ça ne veut pas dire grand-chose, mais qui a monté un modèle quasiment équivalent, un tout petit peu moins performant, équivalent à ChatGPT, et il l'a fait en moins de 12 mois. Donc c'est une courbe qui est totalement exponentielle, et du coup on ne sait pas où elle va s'arrêter. Et par rapport à ce que vous disiez tout à l'heure en disant ChatGPT me déçoit parce que c'est très ennuyeux et les réponses ne sont pas toujours pertinentes, c'est tout à fait vrai aujourd'hui, mais vous ne savez pas ce qui se passera demain. Troisième élément, strictement sur le plan entreprise, je répondrai après sur démocratie, citoyenneté, etc. Ça va créer encore un fossé, une fracture numérique entre ceux qui l'adoptent et ceux qui n'y arrivent pas. J'ai lu quelque part que 60% des Français avaient déjà essayé ChatGPT, mais ils ont essayé, ils ont été s'inscrire, ils ont fait 3 recherches, puis ils sont passés à autre chose. Au niveau des entreprises, c'est pareil. Il y a très peu d'entreprises qui ont adopté de manière systématique l'intelligence artificielle comme outil de productivité. Et donc on risque d'avoir exactement ce qui se produit dans les citoyens, enfin, parmi les citoyens, pardon, pour parler français, c'est-à-dire un écart entre ceux qui sont rentrés dans cette nouvelle capacité de création de valeur et ceux qui ne le sont pas. Il ne faut pas se tromper, le monde entrepreneurial il est aussi fracturé que la société. Parce que quand vous êtes un petit entrepreneur de quelques salariés dans le bâtiment, dans le commerce, etc., mettre en place des outils qui sont chers, compliqués, dont vous ne voyez pas tout de suite les métiers, c'est exactement comme un citoyen. Et donc les riches deviennent plus riches, les Google deviennent encore plus puissants, Google et les autres, pas que Google, et l'écart se creuse. Et donc cette division de la société dont on a beaucoup parlé ce matin se retrouve dans le monde entrepreneurial.
Deuxième petite question avant que je passe à Scott. On sait que les économies, que les entreprises ne sont pas favorables à la régularisation. Je sais que vous travaillez là-dedans. Je vous demande à vous, est-ce que vous faites confiance aux entreprises qui font ça tout seuls ou est-ce qu'il faut vraiment l'État pour définir des limites?
Alors, vous savez ce qu'on dit à Washington, on dit l'Amérique innove, l'Europe régule. Et honnêtement, ce n'est pas entièrement faux. Donc, une fois que j'ai dit ça, je considère quand même qu'il y a matière à réguler intelligemment. Pourquoi? En fait, c'est très bien expliqué par ma voisine. Parce que, au-delà du gain de productivité, au-delà du saut quantique qu'on peut faire, c'est une représentation du monde. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a un biais, enfin vous l'avez très très bien expliqué, un biais culturel, un biais... Et que donc on rentre dans un domaine qui est un domaine de démocratie, qui est un domaine de citoyens, qui n'est pas seulement un domaine économique. Ça c'est la première chose. Et la deuxième chose, c'est qu'il y a un domaine de l'intelligence artificielle qui là sort complètement du champ d'application des entreprises et qui rentre dans le régalien des États, qui est tout le domaine des fake news. On est capable, comme vous le savez, évidemment faire une fausse vidéo, enfin une fausse représentation d'une personne avec une fausse voix très bien imitée. Et donc là, au jour où je vous parle, il y a un certain nombre de membres du comité de direction d'entreprises du CAC 40 qui ont été appelés par un appel WhatsApp par leur président pour faire telle et telle chose, mais ce n'était pas le président. Donc, on est dans le domaine que je qualifierais criminel, dans le domaine. Donc, c'est un outil qui ne peut pas être laissé complètement en régulation à cause de ça.
Merci. Scott, you're at Jigsaw, and when one searches for Jigsaw, one finds only this puzzle game. Jigsaw is an alphabet company working closely with Google. Could you tell us what you're doing there and what the aim is of your services or products or whatever?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank the Tocqueville Foundation for the invitation. I want to thank Jean-Guillaume and Stephanie and the family. It's just been great to see the generations here coming together, helping out. It's been really amazing. I think this is my third or fourth time here, and it's always such a pleasure and delight. I always learn so much from those that you invite, so thank you very much. What was the question?
What are you doing with your company? What are we to expect from you?
Okay, so a little bit about Jigsaw. So Jigsaw, like a jigsaw puzzle, is when you're building a jigsaw puzzle, you're always looking for the missing piece. And it's always better to be building a jigsaw puzzle with lots of different people so that there are different eyes and perspectives at different corners of the table, looking down, trying to find that missing piece. So at Jigsaw, we are part of Google, but we work with a lot of people who are not at Google. We work with a lot of policy people, we work with a lot of academics, we work with a lot of design and marketing firms. And what we tend to do is look at challenges that are coming at the internet, coming at our users, but coming at all users to think about ways that we might mitigate those challenges. So we do that in a number of different ways, but when this sonic boom hit Silicon Valley with the release of ChatGPT, there was a lot of, I can only say this, it's like when there was an oil boom in Texas back in the 19th century, everybody went, right? When there's a gold rush in the 1890s in California, everybody went. So all of a sudden there was a bit of a panic in Silicon Valley. What just happened? There was a tremendous fear of missing out. So trying to understand what these large language models were doing, what was their future, and so what part of our team began to look at was, okay, if there are harms, what are they? How could they be mitigated? How do you begin to think about it? And so that's what we have been trying to do. But one of the things I really want to make clear is we are still in very, very early days. Very, very early days. So how many of you, just by a show of hands, have used ChatGPT or Gemini? How many people of you have heard of Gemini? Okay, good. All right, so yeah. So how many people use ChatGPT or Gemini on a daily basis? Right. So very, very few of you. So there's been a little of experimentation, but very little integration of these tools into your daily life. And the thing is, that's going to change. And that's going to change fairly dramatically, fairly fast. What people are already doing is trying to think about how to use these AI systems to create what are called agents. So how many people in here really enjoy having to program your wedding or your next big party, sending out all the invites, finding the location that you're going to do it, sending out all the invitations, crafting those invitations? How many of you really enjoy doing that? Wow, you guys are masochists, all right? You guys are masochists. So the idea here is that there will be an AI agent that you just tell what to do, and it does it all. And it does it very, very quickly. And so those agents are going to do all kinds of things. And there is a huge amount of effort, time, and focus on building those new agents. Even though, to the points that have been made here, we don't really know what the impact is going to be. So I'll just stop there and we'll come back.
Because you just gave me my next question. I mean, not yet on the impact, but when you say that you work with politicians a lot also, and you're building up these agents, what does that mean for politics? I mean, do you, to be a bit provocative, do you create the agents to help politicians solve our problems?
So most of the agents that are out there right now are not by any of the big companies. There are probably 29 companies right now that are building agents at scale, leveraging ChatGPT or another AI system. So it's not the big companies doing this. But there is this sense, as there was at the beginning of the internet, that there is huge value here. And so people are beginning to chase value. Some of the numbers I've seen are quite astounding. It is predicted by a number of consultancies that there will be compounded annual growth of 43% in this area over the next few years. So the other point I would make is that in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. The other thing that happened in 1989 was that the World Wide Web was created. No one at the time thought anything about the risk of the World Wide Web, right? And the internet expanded, and we all know that there have been one or two difficulties over the years, right? This is going to happen so much faster, and even without the big companies getting engaged, it's going to spread. And I think that FOMO, fear of missing out, is going to drive a lot of the experimentation with these agents. And there's going to be a proliferation of agents, and we'll see where the marketplace ends up. But this is a watershed moment. The BlackBerry to the iPhone was a watershed moment, but not like this one. This is fundamentally different and will accelerate and is the equivalent, I think, to the creation of the internet.
Thank you very much. I mean, there we're really at the watershed moment as we're talking about AI versus citizenship. Just let me put it first, AI and citizenship, and then to decide about whether it is a versus or not. Muriel, we know that for Tocqueville, individual freedom was very, very important, and he also understood that information is important, and he also understood that information can mislead us. And he said that if everything goes well, people just retreat to their own private life. So my question is, if through AI, people can ask any questions, get any answer, can have maybe the idea that every agent is going to solve every problem, what threat is that for democracy and citizenship? Are we about to just delegate democratic information and decisions to AI?
So yeah, so this is a huge question. And I think
I know, but that's what we're here for.
I practically decided to dedicate my life to all these questions, and I should thank actually Laure to invite me, because she obliged me to read a book I bought in 2011 when I was in China. Actually, a friend of mine brought it to Beijing. I was working in a cognitive science lab, and one of my colleagues, Chinese colleagues, told me that the Communist Party was all reading the book of Tocqueville in that period, La démocratie en Amérique. And so I said, okay, so they are reading it, then I have also to read it. And then life came by, a PhD came by, teaching came by, and I finally started the book when you called me. So big thank you, and also thank you to all the Tocqueville family that is giving a very warm welcome, an elegant welcome. So thank you. And so I have to tell you that while I was reading, so I got to the first volume, I couldn't get beyond the first volume, but there's something that was really striking me about the importance of freedom and responsibility inside the citizen. And at Council of Europe, I'm a co-rapporteur of a committee on freedom of expression and generative AI. And we ended up in analyzing the case that Geoffroy was making about voice cloning. And when you think about voice cloning, and take, for example, the Scarlett Johansson case, she has the same freedom of expression now, right? She can express herself even if there is a voice clone of her that can talk from morning to night with whoever wants to talk with ChatGPT. So, but there is something that is happening at scale, that is now her voice, before the cloning and after the cloning, her voice doesn't have the same value. Why doesn't it have the same value? Because it's kind of diluted. And why is it diluted? Because she cannot take responsibility of her voice that is automatically generated. She cannot take responsibility of everything that is said with her voice, because she's not saying it. So this is a fundamental difference of what is happening at scale for her freedom of expression. It's not a direct attempt to freedom of expression, but it's actually, as it's eroding the responsibility she has of her voice, automated voice saying something, she cannot take responsibility for this. This erosion of responsibility is gradually eroding also her freedom. And this is something that was very Tocquevillian in my reading, that came while reading, that if you erode responsibility in everything you decide to automate, then you also erode the fact that you can take the freedom of doing it, saying, this is my work, this is my voice. And so it's complex somehow, but it's also very simple. If you cannot take responsibility of something, you cannot be free to do it. So this is the first aspect. And then the other aspect, maybe a question that you asked about, so the temptation for politicians would be, can we govern through AI? So in the image of the airplane, can we be politicians just staying in the airplane and governing everything with an algorithm, just not going in the street. And it seems to me that this was answered this morning, and the question of responsibility was also talked this morning in a very exemplar way by Dana. So this seems to me one of the most important impacts.
To Geoffroy, comme entrepreneur, vous prenez les décisions à base des informations. Et les informations sont la monnaie. En fait, c'est ce qui compte. Que croyez-vous est-ce que les citoyens vont croire à l'information? Qu'est-ce qu'ils font avec l'information quand ils décident en tant que citoyens?
Là, on touche au fait au vrai sujet de l'IA, dans le contexte démocratique qui est le nôtre, c'est-à-dire que peut-on croire? On a déjà commencé à avoir un certain nombre de doutes. Les réseaux sociaux ont multiplié les manipulations, mais jusqu'à présent, ce qu'on peut dire, on pense aux ingérences russes dans les différentes élections démocratiques, c'était assez grossier et donc relativement détectable. Mais on est déjà dans un système où on est obligé de certifier son compte Twitter pour être sûr qu'il n'y a pas un imposteur qui, avec la même adresse ou une adresse un peu différente, dit autre chose que ce que vous pensez. Et comme vous le dites, finalement, dévalorise. Alors pour un artiste ou une artiste, ça la dévalorise, mais pour un politicien, ça le décrédibilise. Mais ça revient exactement au même. Donc c'est pour ça que je disais tout à l'heure, je pense que cet outil ne peut pas être simplement laissé aux mains du marché, au moins dans sa composante politique et publique. En fait, il me semble qu'il y a deux IA, en fait. Il y a celle qui est utilisée strictement à des fins professionnelles. Je prends un exemple très basique, mais qui est quand même assez significatif. Dans un centre d'appel aujourd'hui, vous avez encore des centaines de milliers d'individus qui répondent de manière un peu mécanique. Je ne suis pas sûr qu'ils soient très heureux de ce qu'ils font à des clients. Alors, il y a ceux qui font bien leur job, il y a ceux que ça ennuie. Très clairement, là, on est capable de fabriquer un agent, c'est le cas de le dire, qui est capable de répondre à 99% des claims, des réclamations de consommateurs, sans créer de biais cognitifs, en donnant une satisfaction plus élevée au client final, et en même temps en remplaçant effectivement du travail par du capital, mais pour le bien-être des collaborateurs. Et donc l'IA professionnelle est probablement, alors c'est un secteur pareil sur les, je sais pas quoi, les banques, enfin il y a beaucoup de back-office qui peut être, et puis l'IA publique, là on rentre dans quelque chose de très différent, et j'ai peur que si on reprend des choses qui ont été dites sur les 2 jours, que ça devienne un enjeu de compétition entre les grands blocs, et en tout cas entre le bloc démocratique et le reste du monde. Et il faut un minima que le bloc démocratique, donc l'Occident pour l'essentiel, se fixe des règles. C'est pour ça que je suis un peu mal à l'aise pour revenir sur la régulation européenne. L'Europe veut réguler, n'arrive pas à entraîner les États-Unis. Les États-Unis disent vous régulez, on ne va pas réguler. Les uns et les autres portent plainte à Bruxelles, n'est-ce pas, cher monsieur? Mais tout ça aboutit au fond à une dispersion. Et je trouve ça, dans le cas de l'intelligence artificielle, très dangereux.
Je crois que Muriel veut dire une très petite chose, très importante.
Très rapide sur la régulation aux États-Unis. En fait, ce qui s'est passé aux États-Unis, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de loi proprement dite, mais par contre, il y a quelque chose qu'on appelle un executive order, un ordre exécutif du président qui est immédiatement implémentable et qui a un peu moins d'une centaine d'articles qui est passé sur l'intelligence artificielle et qui est assez détaillé et notamment ça nous a valu quelques ajouts en plus aussi dans le AI Act parce qu'il était en cours de négociation. Donc le positionnement américain sur la régulation est pas aussi blanc et noir. C'est qu'il y a vraiment une action très très rapide.
Les entreprises auront quand même à faire face, enfin les entreprises et les citoyens, à deux systèmes de règles un peu différents quand même.
Ça va être
Ce qui est honnêtement, si on considère que c'est un enjeu de démocratie contre non-démocratie, il aurait mieux valu faire Team Democrat. Non, pas en termes politiques, mais en termes, j'allais dire...
économiques.
Comment le dire? Enfin, en tout cas, les pays démocratiques.
Oui. Scott, I mean, if we talked about now a bit about fake news, deep fake, etc. What you do if you want to help us, will you help us detect fake news? Will you help us see when we search for something or ask ChatGPT whether that is fake news or that are facts?
I really don't think that you want our company to be deciding what is believable, credible, true, whatever word you want to use, unfortunately. Because if we get into that business, that too is very dangerous, because we are a company and we are regulated at certain levels. And if we're made responsible for that, governments can also tell us what is fake and what is not, which I also think is dangerous for democracy, potentially. So I do think that as human beings, cognitively, we have to get better at discerning and mistrusting the information that we consume, perhaps more so now than before. That said, we are exploring ways to do watermarking on videos. We're looking for new ways of providing information to the consumer about how this was made, where this was made, when this was made. All of that said, though, I think that AI and generative AI can do the same thing ultimately. So we are going to have this challenge, and I was talking to a few people about this earlier, where real identity is something that we have really shied away from enforcing, because we don't want to connect anything to a specific individual, right? So I do think that we're going to have to begin to think creatively, technologically, with governments, with our users, about real identity. Who's publishing what, when, where, in a way that could be traceable without being invasive or breaking privacy. So that's a conversation that I think is inevitable, but it's not a conversation that any one of us is ready yet to have, because we really haven't seen this type of problem arise. I did want to say one thing before I don't know how much time we have, but I did want to say one other thing about this.
7 minutes.
Okay. Josh Mitchell wrote an article in 2018, I believe. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was on when supplements become substitutes. And I was giving that some thought in this area, because I read that the U.S. Surgeon General of the United States has warned that of a widespread epidemic of loneliness in the United States. And he said it posed health risks as clearly as smoking 16 cigarettes per day, with all the associated health costs. These agents are going to end up being very compassionate. They're going to be able to talk to you and speak with you and engage with you and help you erode some of that loneliness. We human beings project onto our pets. We project onto different inanimate objects, things that we feel emotion for. This is a substitute for real human connection. And I do think that that's an area where people are going to invest a lot of energy, because it's such a problem. And I do think that as a society, and being here at the Tocqueville Conversations, it's something we really need to think about. Why is there that epidemic? How do we address it, knowing that these agents are going to be part of that solution, at least in part?
And the question back to you, I mean, how does your company thinks about it? And do you see possibilities to not to submit these personal relationship by AI?
So I think I would say no, because a lot of this is going to be open. People will take the models and they will do what they want with them, and then we'll have to figure out like where they surface and how you get them, like a Play Store for apps. How are you going to find them as users? Where are you going to find them? Right now, you're just searching the web for them, but ultimately there'll be some sort of app store for these things, and there'll be some way of making sure you're into those app stores or being taken off of those app stores in the same way everything else is. So I don't think, right now, if you think about when search was created in the first place, it was Alta Vista, Yahoo, there were all these players involved. There's this little company called Google. It got involved at some point you may have heard of. But then there were app wars. So you have Apple, the Apple Store, and you had the Android Store, and people building apps and putting the apps in the stores. This is going to be that next iteration of that process. And I think it's going to move, like I said, very, very fast. And so these guidelines and regulations, I think the companies, this is my personal belief, I think the companies would welcome this because they want to understand. That's why I think GDPR was such a watershed moment for the industry, and why it was served as the regulation for the world, because the company could implement it, and that became de facto for the entire world. What is the equivalent of that going to look like, and by when?
Last question to you, Muriel. As you're also advising the European Union in regulation, as Europe regulates, yes. I mean, you do that. That means that you are convinced that it's necessary to have some regulation on AI. Do you think that regulation will be quick enough to prevent the worst? And do you think that people should stand up for regulation before it's too late? Is it you only that can do that? Or do people as democratic citizens should want to regulate it? Just a short question, because
a very short question, which goes along with a very short lasagna, because you just ate, you are digesting. And I would like you to show, these are the countries that are heavily regulating AI. These are the countries that are regulating AI now, thanks to a United Nations resolution. And this is the regulatory lasagna. I don't want to bring you there, but it's layered, very layered. So is it going to be very quick? This I cannot tell you. But definitely everyone is around the meat that is in the middle, the regulated entities, producer, developers, supply chain, everything. And what is actually a little bit present here is civil society, but it's present in industry-led and companies and some lobbying entities. And what I would like to say is, to make it work, civil society has to enter and add some cream in this very sticky lasagna. So please do start and think about it. And if I have to add a little Tocquevillian gaze on this, you see that there are two regional national laws that are already passed, that is China and EU. And one of the interesting things about Tocqueville is that he has this idea that politics should be local. And in these two models, you have these two visions of the words. In China, when you want to have an algorithm going to your user, you want to deploy it, you have to deposit the algorithm, the training data, and all the technical information of how you've been building it into a bank that is centralized. While the model that chose in the EU is to have sandboxes that are in each country and that are much more local. Of course, it's very efficient to go the Chinese way. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and I say, it should be done this way in order to have transparency for the users. But it's a quick fix. And so to answer your question, I'll be very Tocquevillian. I think that quick fixes are not good for freedom.
Thank you very much. Do we have the time for one or less? Should we stop? There is one and another question, yes. Just very short, and the third one. I'll keep all the three together and ask you to to ask short questions, but you need the microphone. Yes, there, please. It's coming.
Can you hear me? My name is Carolyn. I go to the American University of Paris. That was fascinating. Thank you so much. I have a few short related questions. First, you talked a lot about how...
One question.
Okay.
The rest is for the coffee break.
Okay. First, how is AI going to possibly make Western cultural imperialism more pervasive, given what you talked about turning language into numbers, the bias there? How can it also be dangerous to critical thinking, which in my opinion is a critical part of being an autonomous individual? How can that threaten democracy? And three, a lot of environmentalists have talked about how AI is very environmentally harmful. It takes up a lot of water. It takes up a tremendous amount of energy. What do you think it says about the state of democracy, the state of the world, that with facing so many global crises, both crisis of democracy and climate crisis, that we're using a tremendous amount of energy to essentially create technology to think for us? Thank you
very much. Can you transfer the micro over there, please, quickly?
Oh, there's the blue banana.
And then there. Yes. Thank you.
Oui, bonjour Hervé Béculard. Alexis Tocqueville disait le cerveau secrète la pensée. Et donc, après la calculette qui a évité le calcul mental, le Google qui nous a évité d'apprendre les départements, GPS pour se repérer, maintenant l'agent, là j'ai bien noté, qui pense et écrit. Quelle sera la capacité de discernement de l'individu et donc le lien avec la démocratie? Est-ce que tout cela renforce quel est l'avenir du cerveau humain?
Et une dernière question là, au coin.
Merci, mon nom est Alexander Vos van Steenwijk. So AI is a juggernaut, it's a watershed moment, and you've spoken about the need for regulation, great deal of incertitude. Isn't the absolute bedrock of the reaction to AI education in critical thinking?
Thank you. Thank you. So we have the critical thinking question twice, we have the energy question, and we have the brain question. I'll give you the brain question. Is that good? Scott, you will take the critical thinking question, and you, as an coming from the economy, you will take the energy question. So please.
Let's start with
So, should there be education in critical thinking? It's more critical than ever, especially if you're going to collaborate with AI, right? So our critical faculties as human beings is what we get to bring to the table to collaborate with AI. So, and that's the phrase that I'm increasingly hearing in Silicon Valley. It's collaborative AI. So what are the tools, what are the ways in which human beings are going to collaborate with AI to do what they want to do? So critical thinking becomes even more important. And I think in the United States, that's a serious, serious challenge. Because we're just, even in our schools, we're not being taught sufficiently about that.
Thank you very much. Asking the economists, because scarcity is always the issue for economists to solve. Geoffroy, qu'est-ce qu'on fait qu'on n'a pas l'énergie pour utiliser tout ça, ce qu'on pourrait
Je vais
utiliser?
quand même répondre aux autres questions, moi, si ça vous ennuie pas.
Pas moi,
Non,
mais
parce
peut-être
que-
la jeune fille qui a demandé les questions.
Non, parce que la question de l'esprit critique me paraît vitale, mais c'est évidemment une question d'éducation. Mais je prends l'exemple de Waze ou de GPS. Vous avez tous, je pense, au moins une fois dans votre vie, décidé que le chemin que vous proposait le GPS n'était pas le bon et que vous aviez envie de tester autre chose. Donc vous avez tous le choix, tous les jours, tous les matins, de suivre ou de ne pas suivre l'algorithme. Alors c'est une faculté qu'il faut cultiver. par l'éducation, par la famille, par les parents, par etc., etc. Mais il faut garder. Et le deuxième point que je voulais faire quand même sur le temps de cerveau disponible, pour prendre une expression bien connue, c'est que sur l'histoire de l'hippocampe, là, l'hippocampus, sauf si je me trompe, le cerveau est très malléable. Si on ne développe pas une partie du cerveau, on peut en développer une autre, avec des tas d'autres sports cognitifs, si j'ose dire. Oui, non, mais c'est comme le sport. Si vous arrêtez, je sais pas quoi, moi le vélo, passer la course à pied ou réciproquement, vous développez des muscles différents. Donc, je suis pas très inquiet sur le. Après, c'est là aussi une décision personnelle de responsabilité. Et sur l'énergie, bien sûr que ça consomme beaucoup d'énergie. Enfin, l'IT en général consomme de l'énergie. Mais simplement, il faut regarder les choses globalement. C'est-à-dire que, je prends un exemple tout bête, mais le télétravail consomme beaucoup d'IT, donc beaucoup d'énergie, sauf qu'il économise monstrueusement, pas monstrueusement d'ailleurs, énormément de CO2 en transport. Et donc ce qui compte, c'est d'avoir des objectifs de réduction globalement de la production de l'économie. Alors chacun peut trouver qu'on ne va pas assez vite, ça c'est tout à fait une discussion possible. Mais globalement, les économies occidentales réduisent leur émission de CO2, tout secteur confondu.
Merci beaucoup. Muriel, are there ways out for our brain?
So I'll answer yes and no. So I'll be very keen of being here in Normandy because so one thing that strikes me, I'm trying to answer the three questions in just one time, which is very difficult for my brain right now. But so the first thing is that there is experimental evidence that in front of a large language model that is biased, we have no critical thinking. And this concept is called latent persuasion. So I do engage you to read this paper about latent persuasion by former colleagues at Cornell, because it's evident that there are situations in which critical thinking is just not enough because of latent persuasion. So this is the first point. And the second point about the brain is that I'm sure there will be many creative ways to continue use our brain, because using our brain is also a pleasure, so that we're not going to deny this to ourselves. But there is a problem that why do we want AI agents? Because we have in the Western country a problem of education already. Why do we want to delegate tasks to algorithms? Because we have a problem of competence in our work, in our labor market. We have a competence problem. So it's important to understand the origin of things. We want to delegate to machines because we have already this educational problem. So if I have to say that the education is the solution, yes, it's the solution to an old problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this super panel. Scott, Carpenter, Muriel Popa-Fabre et Geoffroy Roux. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you.